Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach. Going to take a look at the relevant midfielders today. Did the defenders the other day, so hopefully you enjoyed that video. Basically, I take a look at anyone that's relevant, I guess. So if they're in 3% of sides or more, I take a look at them, and sometimes there's the odd exception. So hopefully it can be used as a bit of a tool for, I've done a few player profiles. I talk about a few of my favourite selections and that sort of thing. But hopefully if there's a fella that I haven't talked about, that you've been wondering what I think or just a general opinion on someone in your side, and they might be in only 4% of teams that I haven't mentioned them yet, hopefully I can cover off on them now. Just a quick little shout out to the Patreon. I know with the leagues, feel free to just, if you're really desperate for a league, you can just jump in, guarantee yourself a spot, then piss off after a month. No stress. Craig, Caddy, Matty Simpson, Phil, Gruffy, thanks heap for your support. So they've been really getting around it, which has been great. And if you guys who are already on the Patreon, if you've got anything that you'd like to see in the season, let me know, because I've got a lot of pre-season stuff with like the leagues and the Q&A. I think will be good. We'll be doing a Q&A. I'll be filming it pretty soon. It'll either be just before this video or just after, but if you've got any thoughts that you want to see out there, you guys are supporting me there, so definitely get around it. But I've had really good subscriber numbers too, which has been great. I think we're nearly up to 2,200, so that's really, really cool. So if you just jumped on board recently, thanks heaps. And as always, to the people that have been on board for ages, big thanks to you guys too, because I know there's quite a few people who have watched for a while now, and I love that, so that's great. But let's take a look at some of this ownership. Let's just... Oh, you're having a look at my favourites. I hope there's nothing dodgy there. Alter that up just a little bit. All right, so Jack Macrae, 26% of sides. And it's pretty hard to argue. He just barely plays a bad game, and he loves it under the roof. The Dogs play plenty of matches there. I know he's expensive, but you just can't argue with it. He just finds so much of the ball. He's an absolute magnet, does it on the inside, the outside, and he's about as consistent as anyone we've got in Supercoach land. So can't argue with him. Lachie Neale, 38%. Similar can be said for him. He's just capable of just racking up so many touches. He's a great clearance player, probably the Lions' best player, and he's just taken his game to the next level at the Lions. Was fantastic last year, and I'd expect a similar average this year. As you can see, he's in my side. Nat Fyfe, 35% of sides. Again, these are the cream of the crop, these guys. So you just got to endorse all these top sort of 6 to 8 fellas, because they're absolute jets of the competition. The only thing I say about Fyfe is that his body is perhaps one that has been battered around and doesn't always reach 20 plus games, and there will be a lot of responsibility on him at the Dockers. That's the only reason I didn't pick him, because I love him. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big Nat Fyfe fan. Great overhead, kicks goals, inside bull. But yeah, when you're spending that much coin, there's just the smallest things that can just make you pick a Lachie Neale over someone else. But if you've gone with Fyfe, he's going to have a great season. So he's one of the absolute superstars of our game. And Josh Kelly, as you can see, he's in my side. I'm a massive fan of him. And they call him the Rolls Royce, and I don't reckon we've seen the best of him yet. We've probably seen the best of him in portions of the season, but I expect to see he's had a fantastic pre-season, and that's what we've been looking for him to actually play a full season. Now, I think he can average about 120. He kicks goals. He's a beautiful kick. And I just expect to have a great season. The fact he's in 13% of sides, I really liked as a slight point of difference for my premium mids. So I really enjoyed that, but he's a star. Same can be said for Cripps. I don't think I need to spend too much time on Paddy. 51% of sides, one of the most popular premium mids, probably the most popular by the looks of it. It's pretty hard to argue. Absolute superstar. And you'll see me talk about him in my crystal ball later tonight. Josh Dunkley, again, slightly point of difference for your premium mids. I just think he's the sort of bloke who can just rack up enormous numbers. And all right, maybe he's not as damaging as Bontempelli and that sort of thing, but for pure numbers, he just tackles, gets 30 plus, and does hit the scoreboard. We've seen him average, I think it was 123 once he made that move into the midfield. First 7 games, whatever it was, he was played out of position or in a different position. Didn't quite work for him. As soon as he played that inside mid-roll, he just was enormous. I think he had a 200. So I just think there's a bit of Tom Rockcliffe at his best about him. Just ticks every box. So I'm a big fan of him. Tom Mitchell, 20% of sides, and I'm definitely not endorsing him. I know he's looked pretty reasonable through the practice games, but I just think he's going to get rested at some point, or he's going to pull up sore at some stage, and he's going to need a little rest. How does he go through a full match, backing it up? So that's my one query on him, and I think there's not a stack of value, to be honest. I know he's cheaper than, maybe slightly cheaper than what he would have been. He was up around that 700 mark when he was really dominant, but I just don't think we're getting that much value for him, and there's a little bit more risk compared to some of these other blokes around him. So that's one thing that's sort of swearing me off him. Paddy Dangerfield, massive fan of Paddy. He looks great throughout the pre-season, but again, a bit like Fyfe, and there are just slight queries, and when you're spending this much coin, you don't want any question marks, and he will shoulder a massive load. I mean, sometimes Kelly copped the tag last year, but the days of Selwood being tagged are over. Dangerfield, if any club decides to tag, they're going straight to Paddy. He can often break them, but it concerns me the amount of focus that will be on him. Plus, he's another year older. He peaked with that sort of 130 stuff and back down to 115, which is still fantastic, but can he get any higher than 115? Is this where he's going to sort of plateau, which is still fine if he averages 113? But again, just little question marks, little things to think about. Marcus Bontempelli, he's been a hot commodity over pre-season. I think at the start of pre-season he was in, I think it was 15 or 16% of sides, and look, he'd probably double that by the time we bounce the ball. If we bounce the ball. Let's not get started on that. But yeah, it's hard to argue, and I've tried to mount the case sometimes. I personally don't think he has the quantity of possessions that others do, but you could also say, well, Shorty, he doesn't need to have the quantity of possessions because he hurts you so much with 23. Just worries me a touch that he might throw in the odd lower one. He hasn't had too many 110 plus averages. I think that's his only one last year. But you could also say, look, mate, I think he's about to embark on a fantastic 3-year window where he goes 115 plus. And I'd say, look, all right, fair enough. So I can see your point there. Adam Treloar, got to put a line through him. Obviously with the injury, he was semi-popular, not popular. I think he was in 8 to 10% of sides from memory. As soon as he copped an injury, though, had to go. Lachie Whitfield, we're locking and loading in the forward line. Clayton Oliver, I'm a massive fan. I pumped him right up early January as one of my absolute faves, and that's sort of what I like about my midfield. I've got two of the more popular guns in Cripps and Neale, but Kelly, Dunkley and Oliver are in less than 15% of sides, and all right, that's not unique, but a lot of people will have Neale, Cripps, Fyfe, Macrae, those four and maybe a fifth. But I like the fact that he ended the second half of last year back where we know he can be, sort of that 111, 112 average, and that's where I expect him to be. I think he's got the capability to go anywhere from 112 to 116 average, but I'll certainly take anything over 110. So I really like him. Elliot Yeo, 5% of teams. It's a no from me. Fantastic player, but I just think that's about his max. I think he's sort of in the prime of his career, playing great footy in a great side, but I don't think he's getting any better than that. And there's better options around that price that could go higher. So, and the same for Gaff. Gaff's about the same. I think he finds plenty of the ball. He's a damaging player, but I just don't see either of those Eagles going beyond 110. I don't even see them touching it. I could see them averaging anywhere from 102 to 108, something like that. That's a pretty big range, mind you, but I just don't think you're getting any bang for buck, and there's better options around them. Boak, 1% of sides, had a great pre-season. He'll probably have another great season, but he was popular last year because he was available as a forward, but I think rightfully so. We've gone off him. And I just broke my rule because he's in 1% of sides, but I thought he was worth a mention just because we spoke about him a lot last year. Now I can sort of start to scroll through a few. Scott Pendlebury, no thank you. Scott, you've been unbelievable for years and years. He was probably my first pick player for a long, long time there. But he'll play a variety of roles, but no longer is he the main man in there. And I think that average of about 104 is about what we're probably going to get. Maybe not even give, probably take a little bit. Because I think the numbers are only going to plateau, and at some stage they'll go down. Tim Kelly, he's been huge. I still am not sure if he can nudge 110, but you might be happy with 108 average at that sort of price. Slightly unders, improves his average by 5 points per game. That might be enough for you. Kills me to say he looks great in an Eagles Guernsey. He really does, but he hasn't really put a foot out of place in the pre-season. So I'm not going to sit here and endorse his selection. I wouldn't be picking him, but clearly people are. I get where they're coming from, but he has not dealt with a tag well. As a Cats fan, I saw that up close, so that's something to think about. Will he cop the tag? We'll have to wait and see. Just a touch of risk about him for mine. A few too many question marks, so I'll skip past him. And just moving down the list, I know Sloane had a little bit of popularity. I reckon he was up around sort of 3, 4, 5%, but perhaps has dropped off just a touch, and rightfully so. I wouldn't be endorsing him too much. Coniglio, he was in my side for a bit of the pre-season and then had a really big second practice game, which I reckon won a few over because he was at, if my memory serves me correct, 11 or 12%. So he's boosted up. What scared me off was A, his body, and B, he just... Look, I had Kelly, I had Whitfield, and I had Coniglio, and I know 3 mids can dominate. Dunkley, Bont, Macrae, Beams, Pendlebury, Swan, Bartel, Corey, Ablett. I know it happens over the journey, but there's just something that worried about his history of scoring, how he'd been, up around that 108, 109. His body's let him down at times. Yeah, there's just minor. I mean, I think he could be a good selection because he had that 0 late last year with the injury. So I think if you take that away, I think he did average about 107, something like that. So you could mount the case that he is underpriced. There is value there, but I just leant towards other players when I shook it around. I just landed on some other guys, but I do think he's a good selection. Walters and Martin are obviously forward line options there. Who else have we got rolling? I know last time someone was like, Shorty, don't you know that you can order them by ownership? I do, but it's a good suggestion. It probably would save me a little bit of time. But I do like just starting from your premiums, working down to your more interesting ones. But yeah, thanks for your comment. Heaney, forward line, but Hugh McCluggage is someone I want to talk about. 4% of sides. Honestly, with some of the teams I've seen, I thought it might have been more like 6, 7 or 8%. There is a bit of buzz about him, and I'm going to have to say no thank you. And don't get offended, McCluggage owners. I think he's a jet. I think he's going to average more, and I think he's going to have a great season. but I don't think he's a good SuperCoach selection, and he's a good example. I've been burnt. He reminds me a little bit of Dan Hannebery when I picked him. I picked Hannebery, I think, after he played that fantastic grand final. He was coming off an season average of 95, and I thought, this bloke's going to take it next level, and he just didn't. And look, McCluggage is a star. What do I think he could average? I reckon he could boost his average by 10 points, which is pretty solid, but at that price, we're not paying him $500,000 to make a bit of coin. You're picking him to have all season. And is he going to average 109 points? Is he going to be a keeper? Is he going to lift it by 14 or 15 points per game? I don't think so. Because he will cop more attention as he continues to get better. I just think he's a risky pick. There's a lot of upside, don't get me wrong, but it takes a lot of guts to go with him, and it's just one that I'll be passing on. But he certainly is gathering a bit of popularity, that's for sure. And Houston's back line, as I always say, we hit this mark in the midfield, and we shouldn't really be selecting too many mid-price types. Sam Walsh, 470, 5% of sides. I'm going to have to say no here to basically the same reason as McCluggage. Averaged 87 last year. Again, he's looked fantastic in the pre-season, but Walsh will now have the battle of copping attention now. He's run around with no real attention, and there is a likelihood that teams now start to say, gee, Walsh covers the ground so bloody well. He's a running machine. We can't stop Cripps, so maybe we just send him to Walsh. I think that's a genuine concern, and even if that doesn't really happen, same discussion as McCluggage. At 470, we're not looking for him to go up to 530 and make 60,000 and trade him out. You want a bloke at 470k to stay in your team all year, and he's not going to lift his average by 20 points per game. If he does, it's one of the more unbelievable starts to any career, which he looks like he could do, don't get me wrong, but he's a superstar in the making. But you just got to play the percentages in this game, and I think there's probably a 10 to 20% chance that he does continue this meteoric rise and does average 106 or 107, but there's probably a 70 to 80% chance, maybe a touch more, that he just averages mid to high 90s and is a bit of an awkward selection. He didn't make you money, and you can't keep him. So they've got to be one or the other, in my opinion. And that's what makes that price range, particularly in the midfield, makes them awkward. Parrish and Greenwood are forward line options. Brad Hill, 4% of sides, get rid of him. Not a SuperCoach selection. I think people have been a little bit enticed by some midfield hype. Robbie Gray, forward line, but I wouldn't be endorsing him either. McPherson will talk more when it comes to forward line. Jack Viney, 3% of sides. Again, get rid of him. I don't think he's a good selection. Yes, he was outstanding, and yes, Chuka, it's his selection to be an unbelievable player in 2020, but I just don't think his ball use is good enough to be an elite SuperCoach player. I see him sort of Ollie Wines type, winning so much inside ball and tackling hard, and I think he'll have Ollie Wines type numbers. I think he'll average sort of 97 to 103 for most of his career, but again, 430. What do we want from that sort of selection? Do you want 100,000? Trade him out? Do you want to keep him all year? Well, if you keep him all year, I think you're just going to probably lose 8 to 12 points versus other people's M6 or M7 or wherever it falls. So I just don't think you're better off saving your coin and making money or going up to a keeper. That's my opinion on that one. Martin, forward line, Hannebery. Again, there's a lot of St Kilda hype, isn't there? There really is. No, thank you. Hannebery is not the player he was, and I don't see him with all his injuries. I don't see him getting back to it. I know that 96 average is there, and he's underpriced because he didn't play that many games, but I don't see him. Again, I'm a broken record here, guys. at 417, he's not going to be a top 12 mid. You're not going to keep him all season. So then I ask you, what are you picking him for? Making money? He's probably, even at his best, he might make 120,000. We ain't picking blokes at 417 to make his money. You got to be brutal in this game. You got to be brutal. Sorry, Dan. I loved him back in his heyday. But, nah, not in 2020. Sorry. Wingard is more your forward option. And we're starting to get now really into your mid-price range. Andy McGrath, 4% of sides. I mean, you're starting to hear my mantra here, aren't you? I don't like picking these awkward priced players in the middle because to be a keeper in the midfield, put it this way, what do you need a defender or a forward to average to be a keeper? You can probably accept early 90s, particularly in the forward line this year, but more or less mid-90s. And I think McGrath will average mid-90s. I think we're going to see a big boost in his numbers. Number one pick, he looks unbelievable, looks ready to go. But that ain't going to cut it. We need our midfielders. When you finish the season in round 18, round 19, when you complete your side, whenever it is, you want to see that midfield with averages of 122, 119, 117, 116, 109, 108, sort of, you get what I'm saying. There's no point having McGrath. You've held him for 18 rounds. He's had a great season. He's averaged 98. He's lifted his average by 25 points per game. But he's not a keeper. Where old mate, he's got a bloke who's averaging 108. And in theory, you're losing 10 points each week just on that player compared to your mate. And, it's not to be confused that I'm bagging these blokes out because they are all going to have very good seasons and very much improved seasons. But I just don't see them as good SuperCoach selections. So I hope it comes to fruition because, I don't like telling people to just purely ditch a bloke when they're probably watching this video going, I can't wait to see what he says about Viney or McGrath. And then I'm like, see ya. So I don't want to be too harsh here, but I'm just trying to do the best for your side with Shorty's opinion. Quinton Narkle, 3% of sides. Again, see ya. Sorry, mate. Yes, 104 average. It looks nice and sexy on the page, but he's not going to average that. He's not going to get close. He's going to get some good midfield time. Don't get me wrong. A lot of centre bounces at the Cats. That's great, but he's still young. He will be inconsistent. He's even been a little bit injury prone at the Cats. I see him as a good year to average high 80s would be a good year. So just, we should not go near him, unfortunately. Ed Brayshaw, a man that I am quite the fan of, as is Stephen. Tom Scully. What are we doing here? What are we doing? I think I saw in the Herald Sun he was in Buccanara's team. I was just like, oh, Gary, what are you doing, mate? But no, I don't have to tell you, do I? Let's get rid of him. There's Smith in our forward lines. See, now we're getting to the range where you can just genuinely justify a mid-pricer in your midfield. So, oi, Paddy Dow, 3% of sides. That's awkward. Ed Richards, interesting. I won't talk about him because he's probably in people's forward lines, but didn't realise that. We're really starting to run out. George Hall and Smith, like I said, in the defenders, I've got no idea what 3% of people are doing picking Hall and Smith. And I think we've just about run out here. We're obviously hitting the rookies. Rowell, I think, is an out-and-out lock. Don't have to explain that one. And Anderson, you can understand why. SuperCoach loves those top picks generally. And Bonner, I'll speak about him more in the forward line, but I think he should go because he really didn't get much exposure in the Pracky game, which doesn't bode well for round one. But that just about sums it up, I think, guys. We've covered a bit there. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video. It'll be time-stamped. as they always are. So, and as I mentioned, if you're interested in the Patreon, or if you're an existing Patreon, give me some feedback. Let me know what you'd like to see, particularly in the season. I should have time to do a Q&A. Actually, to reward the people, I'll do that later. I'll do that in another video. We've got the Q&A coming up, but just stay posted. We've got plenty of videos coming out over the next few days, and I bloody hope we do see round 1. I'm dying for some footy. It's going to be a weird old start to the season. So I'm just gunning ahead as if SuperCoach and the AFL season is going to go ahead as normal. It's pretty up in the air, but we'll see how we go. I'm going to bust out a Q&A video, I think. Then I'm going to go and watch the first race at Caulfield. Rainbow Thief, let's get up, surely. And who else do I have? I think Stars of Carrum I was big on. But I'm straying from my area. I'm not a racing expert, but Rainbow Thief, race 1, that's what Shorty's hoping to get his day off to an absolute flyer. So I'll talk to you guys later. Cheers.